They weren't dinners in the dreamy cookbook sense. They were meals that stood between families and real hunger. In 1960s working-class Britain, supper wasn't about flavors or presentation. It was about making it through. Forget five-course menus. The only ingredients that mattered were what was left at the bottom of the pantry or what the butcher had on discount. And in millions of homes, these low-cost dishes didn't just fill plates, they kept families going. Beans on toast. The legendary tin dinner nothing defined that decade better than beans on toast. The moment you peeled back the tin and heard those beans plop into the pan, you knew dinner was on the way. By the mid-60s, Heinz cans were practically furniture in corner shops, iconic blue and white labels visible from the street. At under $1 a tin, they fed the masses. Mothers browned toast under a grill, stirred the beans till they simmered thick and glossy, and in minutes, the air turned sharp and sweet. Kids devoured it without question. Dad stepped through the door expecting it. Complaints were rare, empty plates, common. By 1967, Heinz was churning out over 1 million cans a day just for the UK. Maybe the sauce stained everything orange. Maybe the jingle, beans, mains, Heinz, looped in your head, but no one could deny its place at the table. Egg and chips, the people's favorite. Then came egg and chips, a humble showstopper. Eggs cost next to nothing in the 60s, and a big sack of spuds could see a family through the week. Frying pans sizzled furiously as thick-cut chips bubbled into golden goodness, while eggs cracked into hot fat with satisfying pops. The smell drifted from open windows, collecting on brick walls and washing lines, alerting the street to another working-class feast. Kids beamed. It was often their favorite dinner. Cafes served it on white plates with enamel mugs of tea, buttered bread lined up like currency. Meatless, frill-free, and perfectly basic. A heaped plate of chips, 2 runny eggs, and the solid comfort of something hot at the end of the day. Bubble and squeak. Second chances in a frying pan. Next came a dish that earned its name from the noises it made, bubble and squeak. This one had no glory, no flash, just second-day vegetables crackling in old fat. Sunday's leftover cabbage and spuds were mashed together, flattened in a pan, and fried until crispy at the edges. The squeak? That was real. Tiny sighs and hisses as the browned mixture met the pan. Miners and factory workers argued it tasted better on Monday mornings with a fry-up. The scent of boiled cabbage clung long after the last bite, catching in fabric and memory. No one raved about it, but no one turned it down either. It was dependable, filling, and for households scrimping to the next payday, it meant survival. Toad in the hole, the magic of stretching sausages. Toad in the hole made next to nothing feel like something special. Meat was pricey, so butchers padded sausages with rusk and cereal. They barely had pork, but slide them into Yorkshire pudding batter, and suddenly you had a centerpiece. Flour, eggs, and milk got whipped into a thick pour. Mothers lined sausages in trays, poured in the batter, and watched as the oven puffed it golden around the edges while the sausages browned inside. Gravy drenched each chunk and plates cleared fast. For kids, it faked a Sunday roast. For parents, it was a secret weapon. 3 sausage links, 6 hungry mouths. Job done. Mince and onions with mash, backbone of the work week. Now we come to mince and onions with mash, the backbone of weekday cooking. Mince was cheap, fatty, and sometimes barely beef. Mixed with onions, stretched with carrots, drenched in bubbling brown gravy, and laid over mashed potatoes. It became the hot, stick-to-your-ribs kind of dish that soothed tired bodies. Some tossed in frozen peas. Others didn't bother. The key was transformation, taking low-grade meat and coaxing it into something rich and comforting. Families had it 2 or 3 nights a week. You might remember the buttery hiss of mince in a hot pan, onions softening slowly, or the way dinner turned every plate brown from gravy. It wasn't flashy, but it filled the silence at the end of a long workday. Shepherd's pie, making Sunday stretch into Monday. Then there was shepherd's pie, the dish that gave leftovers new purpose. Sunday's roast lamb, no matter how little remained, got minced with veg and a bit of onion, then tucked under a smooth dome of mashed potato. Meat was scarce. Mash was plenty. Still, when it browned under the grill, a golden crust crisping at the edges, it felt like a true treat. In the north, if beef replaced lamb, it became cottage pie, a technicality no one cared about. The appeal was universal. Families scraped the sides for the crisp bits. Kids dove through mash to the warmth beneath. Shepherd's pie didn't just feed, it comforted, even when there wasn't much to start with. Cottage pie, poor man's roast cottage pie, largely identical to its lamb-based cousin, was a fixture in homes short on meat but long on need. Butchers sold off scrap beef filled with sinew and fat for barely anything. Fry it with onions, layer it into a dish and smother it with potato. Suddenly, it looked like dinner. Carrots were grated in to help it stretch, sometimes oats too. It all baked until the top browned and bubbled. To kids, it felt just as grand as a roast. To parents, it proved you could still serve something proud-looking, even when every penny counted. Every crusty edge, every spoonful was scraped clean. Stew and dumplings. A winter essential. Stew and dumplings was winter's answer to empty fridges. Tough beef cuts, shin or chuck, simmered for eternity, softened under patient heat. Carrots, turnips, and swede joined in, and barley sometimes swelled in the simmering pot. But the showstoppers were the dumplings, soft lumps made from sweet, flour, water, humble but magical. Kitchens filled with fog as pots boiled on ranges, windows sweating fat drops onto windowsills. The final ladle into enamel bowls was like pouring warmth into your bones. It wasn't a meal for taste. It was a meal for need, and it never missed. Corned beef hash. From tin to table, when fresh meat was rare, you turned to tins. Enter corned beef hash, a pantry hero. Arriving by the crate from Argentina or Australia, corned beef was pink, salty, and unmistakable. Crank open the tin, slide out the block, dice it, and toss it in a pan with onions and potatoes until the edges browned. Add bread and you had dinner. Kids sometimes wrinkled noses at its tang. That vague metallic flavor never truly hid. But fry it hard enough, and it gained some respect. Especially in northern households, it was carved into more memories than anyone cared to admit. Spam fritters. A crunchy relic of rationing, spam fritters walked the same line. Meat by miracle, not by sauce. Imported from America during wartime, spam stuck around. It was weird, soft, pink, and squelched out of tins like clay. But once battered and fried until golden, it found its place on pub counters and school trays. Some loved it, nostalgic for the crunch and salt. Others remember it like a bad dream, teeth-hitting batter bombs beside soggy chips. Fridge or not, spam waited weeks on a pantry shelf. For families without many options, it was flexible, long-lasting, and exactly what you had when payday was out of reach. Fish fingers, the freezer revolution. And then came innovation by freezer, fish fingers. Birdseye launched them in '55, claiming victory over bones, stink, and hassle. By the '60s, they lived in nearly every British freezer. Parents praised them for speed. Kids loved them for what they weren't. Oily kippers or gray pilchards. These were golden sticks, crisp outside, flaky inside, dipped in peas, cleaned off plates in minutes. 60 million sold a year by mid-decade, and frozen didn't seem lowly anymore. It was modern. If your first tea was fish fingers, mash and peas on an enamel plate, you were one of millions. Cheap sausages. The everyday protein, cheap sausages deserve their due. Pale, soft, and barely meat, they were the workhorses of tea time. Swollen with cereal and water, they curled in the pan, splitting open as they cooked. Mothers hid them under onions or gravy, shoved them into stews or mashed them alongside bread. No one expected flavor, just fuel. Kids didn't care. The sizzle alone triggered hunger. They probably had more breadcrumb than pork, but no one asked. They were the meal that didn't pretend to be anything else, just hot, salty, filling, and a reliable end to the day. Bread and dripping. Dinner from scraps. Bread and dripping was thrift in a jar. The leftover fat from Sunday's roast skimmed into pots, hardening as it cooled. Come Monday, that solid white top and jelly-rich base got slathered on slices of white bread, sprinkled with salt, and handed to kids as lunch. Some took it to school in wax paper, chewing slowly under cloudy skies. The taste? Heavy, salty, rich, but most importantly, as it was free. When shelves were bare, that little pot of dripping did a big job. In every working-class home, it sat on the shelf like a secret weapon against hunger. Bread and cheese, supper or survival in the leanest weeks, some dinners hardly passed as meals. Bread and cheese, thin wedges of whatever was left, laid beside pickled onions or, if luck struck, a dollop of Branston. Slices of crusty bread turned scraps into supper. Kids didn't care that it was bare. It silenced growling stomachs. Fathers chased it with mugs of tea or a pint down the road. It was plain, ordinary, and profoundly important, because sometimes just enough was truly enough. Liver and onions, love it or gag on it, but if one meal split opinions right down the middle, it was liver and onions. Half the price of steak, liver showed up often, fried in shallow pans till the scent took over the house. Mothers praised it, doctors approved it, and children dreaded it. That unmistakable metallic tang lingered, and no amount of onions could hide it. Still, it was packed with iron, and the Ministry of Food said it was good for you. Some remember it tender, drowned in gravy. Others gagged from first bite. Either way, you never forgot liver and onions. Steak and kidney pudding. The Sunday reward at least Sundays tried. Steak and kidney pudding was as close to feasting as thrift allowed. Made with chuck and kidney held in soft, sweet pastry, it steamed to perfection, trapping every drop of flavor, until slicing into it released a flood of rich, dark gravy. Kitchens filled with its smell. The crust crackled at the edges. For a few moments, it really did feel like luxury. But even here, cost ruled. Sweat was pennies, kidney even less. With smart hands, mothers made a roast worth 6 plates from scraps fit for none. Cauliflower cheese. Comfort. Without meat, cauliflower cheese was one of those rare meatless meals that still felt warm and whole. A head of cauliflower boiled till soft, covered in thick, bubbling cheese sauce. Sometimes from the real thing, sometimes from powdered mix, then browned under the grill. Kids dug in, scraping enamel plates clean, chasing cheese strands to the end. Bread on the side meant nothing good was wasted. It was simple, dense, and oddly elegant, a break from the usual grays and browns of weeknight fare. Kippers, the unmistakable plate kippers. You loved them, or truly didn't. Smoked solid in northern kilns and sold cheap, their scent entered the house before they did. Fried hard till the skin curled, served with buttered bread, they were potent, smoky, oily, unmistakable. Fathers sang their praises. Kids turned away. And even hours later, curtains and jumpers carried the reminder. For some towns, they were a staple. For others, an endurance test. Either way, you always knew when kippers were for tea. Bone broth. When there was nothing else, bone broth wasn't glamorous. It was the last step before nothing. Butchers handed bones over for free, some still clinging to scraps. Mothers boiled them slow, sometimes all day, until water turned murky and rich. Toss in barley or a carrot, and that pot might feed everyone. Windows fogged up, the air thick and savory. Come evening, the broth was ladled into bowls, served with dry bread. To children, it felt weak. To parents, it was proof that patience and know-how could pull dinner from thin air. Chips with scraps. The fried treasure in true chippy fashion. Chips with scraps offered tea-time salvation for pennies. When fish was too much, kids waited for chip bags dotted with scraps. Those crunchy shreds of batter floating loose in the fryer. Wrapped in newspaper, soaked with vinegar, they were sizzling gold. Some skipped the chips altogether, just scraps, thank you, piled high and steaming, streets filled with their scent on Friday nights. Neighbors carried paper parcels glowing with grease. Waste to some, childhood gold to others. Jam sandwiches, cheap and cheerful. Last came the simplest of simple, jam sandwiches. White bread, a slather of jam, and often no butter. Cheap, sweet, and easy. Kids loved it. Mothers loved how far one jar would stretch. Sticky fingers, pink-stained lips, and waxed paper folded perfectly around 2 soft slices. Jam regularly joined bread, tea, milk, and sugar among the top groceries every week. And in those moments of tight budgets and quiet evenings, 2 slices of bread and a smear of strawberry could feel like a blessing. Faggots and peas. Nose-to-tail ingenuity in the Midlands and Wales. Dinner sometimes meant faggots and peas, minced liver, heart, and whatever else couldn't be sold on its own. Bound with breadcrumbs, baked into balls, and drowned in rich onion gravy. Mushy peas softened the salt, and few asked what went in. Butchers made trays fresh. Mothers served them hot. Kids grew up with full stomachs and no questions. They weren't pretty, but they were powerful, stretching scraps into comfort. Peas pudding with ham scraps. Northeast humble staple peas pudding and ham scraps came from tougher times still, mostly remembered in the Northeast. Yellow split peas boiled to mush, salted and stirred to thickness, then spread on bread like paste. If there were ham pieces, they got stirred in for extra bite. Jars sat in larders, ladled frequently for sandwiches or hot tea. Bland? Maybe, but it filled empty stomachs with warmth and weight for next to nothing. Tripe and onions. Britain's divisive dish tripe and onions was the dish that drew hard lines at the table. Slippery boiled cow stomachs sold for next to nothing, often swimming in milky onion broth. Some fathers ate it joyfully, claiming it gave them strength. Kids often cried through it. The smell, the texture, the look. In northern towns, tripe shops sold it like chips. Boiled soft till it nearly melted, it haunted kitchens with its sour scent. Some recall it fondly. Others pray never to see it again, but nobody ever forgot it. Boiled cabbage and potatoes, the last resort. And then there was boiled cabbage and potatoes, the bleakest plate of all. When cupboards echoed and coins ran low, this was what fed the family. Cabbage boiled until limp and dull. Potatoes, plain, unbuttered, served beside. The scent filled flats and lingered in hallways, unmistakable and stubborn. Kids pushed it around with forks, clinging to hope for custard afterward. Parents barely blinked while eating, not out of love, but necessity. No one looked forward to it, but when there was nothing else, it did what needed doing. These weren't just meals. They were lifelines, born of war, rationing, poverty, and perseverance. They filled the backs of terrace houses, smoky cafe counters, school halls, and chipped enamel plates. For some, these dishes warm the heart. For others, they bring back every twist of the nose and empty kitchen cabinet. But they all reflect a truth. In a Britain still rebuilding, waste wasn't an option, and thrift was a skill. Which of these did you grow up with? Was it the comfort of shepherd's pie, the dread of liver, or maybe just a jam sandwich wrapped in paper? Share your story. It's part of our history too.